Hi everybody, my name is Goldner. I'm 23 years old. I'm German Brazilian. I'm working as a Flutter engineer in a Japanese company called Utrust. And I talk 5 languages, so let's talk in any of those later. Today, what? Okay, today we have gathered in this big hall to be talking about state restoration in Flutter. And also, one person in this room is going to vanish right now. So let's see where this red spot lands. I certainly wouldn't want to be that person. And oh, you. Okay, so Manuela is now going to vanish from the audience to the stage, so let's give an applause. Okay, Manuela, so I've heard you like my Japanese, wanted to try out my Japanese learning app, so let's have a look at that. Just try it by tapping into it and learning a little bit while I explain to the audience. So this app basically is like a grammar, like a vocabulary learning app, but instead of flashcards, it's with like about grammar, Japanese grammar, since I'm studying for the next exam. And you can see if Manuela is trying it out right now, and since she's half Japanese, she probably knows most of it. And why did you stop?
I don't know. It's kind of boring, Lucas.
Okay. It's boring.
Yeah.
What would you like to do instead then?
Maybe play a game or something?
A game? I mean, sure, we can play some games. I've got this cool Sonic game that I made recently, so maybe you want to try it out. You have to click all the heads quickly. Yeah. You know, I ran into this bug where every time one of the heads is clicked, like 3 million JSON objects get loaded into the app, and yeah, you see the UI keeps kind of freezing. Should have used an isolate. Anyway, maybe we should get back to the talk. Let's go back into my app. Maybe you haven't catched it. Thanks, by the way. So what just happened over here is, if we come back to the, okay. So what just happened is, we were into the app, we made some progress, clicked some cards, and were like at 5 cards into the review. Then we backgrounded the app because Manuela wanted to play a game. So we played this very graphically intensive game, and it took so much memory that we had to, the system cleared the first app to release some memory. And when we got back into the app, the state was vanished, like Manuela vanished earlier. So with state restoration, our goal is now to be able to restore the state where we left off, even though the memory was released. So let me explain you quickly why this specifically bothered me. So I have to imagine some guy walking in Japan to his favorite restaurant, Matsuya, and he was trying out his new app that he just built for himself. It was really nice. But then his mom called, and so he went on the phone, talked to her, and wasn't even using the phone and put it into his pocket while listening with the AirPods. So he wasn't using the phone. And later, after the call, he went back to the app, and all of the progress was lost. So he was really annoyed. And he was like 200 cards in. That was me, by the way. So that was really annoying. So now let's take another example. So in this case, we have a very long registration form that we fill out with, of course, good data and animated. I think I'm not typing correctly. That should be animated switcher. Then pick my favorite state management, which is the best. And we fill out a lot of other information. So now we choose a profile picture. And at least for me, I usually have to swipe a lot, find like the perfect picture. I swipe like through 300 pictures in some seconds. And this can lead to the memory getting pretty full. And when I select a picture now, all of our form progress is gone from till now. So yeah, this can be pretty annoying. So to summarize once again, our app state just got snapped. So what can we as developers do to save it? There are multiple ways of doing this. For example, using a database to persist our data. We can use packages like hydrated block, which actually in the background just use Hive, another database package, which I learned for this talk, so I wanted to share this. And you can use a JSON file also, like just serialize all of your data to a JSON file and store it in your application directory. It's also completely feasible. Or use the restoration manager, which we'll be talking about later. But we have to differentiate between two things. Long-lived states and instant states, or also app states and ephemeral states. So what is what and when do I need which to use? For this, I created this interesting graph from the Flutter docs. I've recreated it. And it basically maps you for which type of data you should persist it in which way. So for instance states, for example, you could, instance states would be like your navigation stack or the last position you scrolled at. Those are type of data you wouldn't say persist for each session probably, or store in your database. So this is, those are the instance states, and we have the app states, which are what we should probably persist. Let's take a banking app for an example. We probably don't want to save, we definitely want to save the money all the time, so the user doesn't get anxious when his money isn't shown anymore for some reason. Okay, but now let's talk about the restoration manager, which is definitely for the instance states or ephemeral states. So the restoration manager works in the sense that we have a restoration bucket, and that stores all of our application information. And those restoration buckets are consisted in a kind of tree-like way. And in the top, we always have the root bucket, and then we have the child buckets. And the child bucket can claim another child bucket to get the information of that child bucket that is stored in there, but we can also use that to write data into that. And all of those data are saved in a key value pair, like shared preferences, and those can be of any of your primitive types like null, bool, string, or list and maps consisting of those type of data. And there's a catch. So if you save your data, you should try to save the least amount of data as possible, since Android has a 1 megabyte limit. And if you go over that, your state won't be restored and you will get an exception, and we don't want that. So if you need a big object, a heavy object for your screen to re-render, you should not save the entire object because that would be too much, but rather save like an ID and use that ID later to fetch it from a database or some API. But we as developers, we will, as Flutter devs, will probably interact only using the restoration ID or restoration scope ID, which are properties found in many Flutter widgets. And what the restoration ID does, if we adjust set one, is that the data the data we're saving in that widget will be put into a child bucket in the nearest child bucket in the surrounding tree. And if we set a restoration scope ID, we'll create a new child bucket. And if we want to enable state restoration in the first place for the entire application, we want first to set a restoration scope ID in the material, Cupertino, or widgets app. If that is done, then your state logic will start working. And what it basically does, it surrounds your app with a root restoration scope widget, which handles the restoration logic. And you can also, if you have some state that you want to restore above your material app, then you can use the root restoration scope widget directly. Otherwise, so for iOS, it wouldn't be iOS development if we didn't need to go to Xcode. So you go to Xcode, set in the main storyboard the restoration ID, and then iOS will also work. Now here's some examples again for the restoration ID. So for the text field, you just set it there, or a single child scroll, you can also have a restoration ID. So if that is set, they will start restoring their data. But now if we want to persist where the navigation was headed, the last session, we need to use, instead of push and push named, we need to use restorable push and restorable push named. So make sure to use those. The next thing for custom widgets, which we mostly use and want to save data from, we need to use the restoration mixin. The restoration mixin if we add it to our stateful class, needs to override the restoration ID and needs to be, of course, a unique one. And if we set that, there's also a restore state function that we need to register all of our properties into using a specific ID. And our properties that we can save need to be of this restorable type. So we can't use int or string. We need to use restorable string, restorable int, and so on. If those are registered, they will be saved. Now, for each variable call that we do on those variables, we need to use the dot value function to get the actual value now, and don't forget to dispose them as well. Now let's talk about my production app, Japan Anana. This was kind of a project where I used a lot of packages because I wanted to learn and try them out. And the first one was GoRouter, which supports state restoration. That's not the issue. The issue is my navigation parameter. You just need to set a restoration ID into your GoRouter definition, then GoRouter will support it. But my navigation parameter, since the app is being restored, won't be there since we are not navigating into it anymore. So it will be null, and the screen will throw an exception. So that was my first problem. The second thing was I was using a stateful hook consumer widget, as you can see. And that doesn't behave like a stateful widget in the sense that if I use my restoration mixin with it, then I need to override like 11 properties instead of 2, and this would be a bit annoying. So I wanted to work around that. And hooks. I had some hooks in this widget, and I recommend you to write a custom hook like use restorable int or use restorable string, which would make sense, but I did something hackier and it's not so optimal, but it led me to an interesting solution that also kind of works. So let's fix those problems now. The first thing is the navigation parameter. It was I was getting a null when it was being restored, so I made it nullable. So it didn't crash directly, just a little bit later. But for me, this problem was at least kind of fixed. So the next thing is my stateful hook consumer widget. I basically refactored it, so now there's a stateful widget around my stateful hook consumer widget. And the stateful widget now handles the logic to save the navigation parameter that was last passed in. So in this case, we have this lecture type here, and it's now in my state declaration, I have now this restorable enum. And this state really just saves the parameter after 1 second and disposes also. And then we take this this restored parameter and pass it into my stateful hook consumer widget again, so that we have now an non-nullable parameter that we can work with. And what I specifically did here is passing first the navigation parameter and then after that the restorable value, since it could be that you kind of navigate again into your screen, but maybe it will then use your restored value, and that wouldn't be your new value. So I first use the navigation parameter and then the restored value. And the restored value will have a default value, so you can definitely expect to have a value at the end here. And as I've said, the last thing were the hooks over here. So I had a review progress that is a use state of an integer, and you can't use it for the restoration. So what I found kind of by accident was this restoration scope off, which you can use to get the nearest child bucket in your tree. And using that, I can now read or write data into it with a specific ID, which is what I did. And inside of my increase progress function, I'm now writing the ID and also updating my hook again, so the widget re-renders. It isn't optimal. We have now 2 variables doing the same thing, so don't do this. I just wanted to showcase this restoration scope part here. And yeah, so in the end, everything was working now. Now some development tips from my side while I was integrating it into my app. Firstly, use Android. It saves you so much time because you can enable this cool setting over there, don't keep activities, which then every time you background the app and go into the app again, will basically restart it, and it will simulate this restoration process. So you can use it to test it while you're developing. The next thing is you should definitely recompile your app when you do changes to your restoration logic, since the hot reloaded changes are not saved on device. So if you change something and try to restore it, it could be that it's using your new behavior, and yeah, you will get some different behavior. So make sure to recompile your app if you're working on the restoration logic. Now, once again, only use iOS if you really have some kind of case for it. They will behave similarly. So you probably won't have a case where you do need to adjust something for iOS, but I don't know, maybe you have such a case in which you have to adjust it. So try to use Android. And also for widget tests, the important thing, or integration tests, is you have to use this tester.restart and restore function, since let's take the default counter widget test example and set it write it 2 times. The first time it runs, it will start at 0, then we will press the button and it will reach the 1. But if we run now the second test, it won't start at 0 anymore, but at 1. And yeah, this isn't good. Now our tests are coupled with each other, and this is really bad. So make sure to use this function either before each or after each your tests, and then you should be ready to go. Now let's go back to my app. I think perfect. So I've got my app loaded up here now in Android, since I can now background it. And if we go now again into app, so just so you see it again. So we were in card 2 and had this card open. Now I enter the app again. It will basically restore it, and we see we are back at card 2 where we left off. So the restoration worked. And this, thanks. But now the presentation is over. So check out the repository. I've linked not only my slides made with Flutter deck, but also my Japan Nana app, which is open source. So you can check out the restoration logic again there. I think there should be a form where you can submit me feedback if you would help me. And yeah, let's connect on X. And this was it. Thanks for your attention.